You're watching Cheat Sheet Tales, where true stories of love lies and betrayal come to life. If you're enjoying these videos, don't just watch, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Now let's get into today's story. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who kept secrets. I grew up in a small, quiet town where people trusted each other, and I always believed honesty was the foundation of any strong relationship. I still believe that, but sometimes life brings you to a place where everything you believed is tested in ways you never imagined. My name is Ria. I've been married to Kieran for 8 years now. He's a decent man, hardworking, responsible and quiet. The kind of husband people describe as stable. I used to think stability was all I needed, had a routine that worked dinner, a bit of TV, sleep and repeat. It was calm, predictable, safe. But over time, that calmness started to feel like silence. That predictability turned into distance. We stopped talking about things that mattered. Conversations became practical. Who's picking up groceries? Who's paying? Which bill? Whether the water heater needs fixing. Nothing deeper than that. We didn't fight. That's the strange part. There were no shouting matches or slamming doors, just quiet. A kind of emotional vacuum that neither of us acknowledged out loud. It was around this time that I connected with Rohan, an old college friend. We'd been close once, part of the same friend group, always laughing, always debating everything from politics to movies. I hadn't seen him in years. One evening I came across his name while scrolling through a college alumni group online. I sent a message just to say, hello. I didn't expect much, but he replied instantly. That first conversation was light. We exchanged updates, careers, families, cities. He was single, had recently moved back to town to be closer to his aging parents. He worked in publishing and was still the same warm, witty person. I remembered he made me laugh, which felt like something I hadn't done in a long time. Not the polite kind of laughter I gave Kieran at the dinner table, but that uncontrollable kind that makes your eyes tear up. Our conversations became regular. At first, just harmless texting, memes, jokes, book recommendations. But soon it was more than that. We started talking about life, about loneliness, about how growing older didn't necessarily mean feeling more fulfilled. Rohan had his own stories, relationships that hadn't worked out, friends who drifted. He listened when I talked about the silence in my marriage, and he never judged. He just understood. I didn't tell Kieran about Rohan. At first, I convinced myself it wasn't important. It was just a friend, but slowly I realized it was more than that. I started hiding my phone when Kieran walked into the room. I stayed up later than usual waiting for Rohan to text back. There was a thrill in our connection, but more than that, there was comfort. Someone finally saw me. Not just the woman who folded laundry and remembered doctor's appointments. He saw the real me, the one who used to dream, who used to write poetry in college. Wows to want more. One afternoon, Rohan and I met for coffee. It was innocent. We sat at a small cafe near his office catching up like old friends, but something shifted. Seeing him in person again felt different. Real, his presence was calming. And when he spoke, he looked into my eyes like he was really listening. Not like Kieran, who had long ago stopped asking how my day was. We didn't touch. Nothing physical happened. But that day when I went home, I felt a guilt that sat in my chest, like a stone. I kept replaying every word, every smile, every moment. I told myself it was just a coffee, just a friend, but I knew, deep down, it wasn't that simple. After that meeting, things changed inside me. It started questioning everything. My marriage, my choices, the life I had built with Kieran. I wasn't unhappy exactly, but I wasn't truly happy either. I was surviving, not living. I didn't want to hurt Kieran. He hadn't done anything wrong, but he also hadn't done anything right. In a long time, he didn't notice. When I got a haircut, didn't ask why. I seemed quieter. He was always buried in his laptop, always tired, always somewhere else, even when he was right in front of me. Rohan, on the other hand, would text me, just to say he'd heard a song that reminded him of college, or send a picture of a bookstore and say, "Thought of you." It felt innocent enough, but it meant everything to me. Those small gestures felt like rain after a long dry season. I tried pulling back. I really did. I told Rohan we should slow down, talk less. He respected it. He said he didn't want to come between me and my husband. But even in that, he was kind. Too kind. And that made it harder. I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just journaling short poems. Rohan encouraged it, said I had a voice that deserved to be heard. I hadn't heard that in years. Kieran had never even read anything I'd written. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old notebook from college. It had pages of poems I'd written when I first met Rohan. That brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years. Not romantic ones, just ones where I felt alive, curious, full of ideas. I missed that version of myself. And Rohan reminded me of her. The emotional distance between Kieran and me became more obvious. We lived in the same house, but in different worlds. I'd sit at the dinner table thinking of conversations I'd had with Rohan earlier. That day I wanted to share those thoughts with someone, but not with my husband. That realization scared me. I wasn't proud of it. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but for the first time in years, I felt heard, seen, valued. One night Kieran came home early from work and asked if something was bothering me. I wanted to tell him everything right there. I wanted to open up about the silence between us, about how lonely I felt even when he was around, but I didn't. I just smiled and said I was tired, and he accepted that answer like he always did. That was the moment I realized how far we'd drifted. A few days after that night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a cup of tea. I'd let go cold. I wondered how we had come to this point, me and Kieran. Two people, once full of plans, now just sharing a space. Not a life. I couldn't blame him for everything. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped trying to, but now I was in a place I didn't recognize, quietly craving conversations that didn't belong to my husband. Rohan and I hadn't spoken in a few days. After I told him we needed space, he respected it, like I knew he would, but I felt his absence more than I expected. I missed the warmth in his messages, the way he always asked the right questions, the way he made me feel like I still mattered. I spent those days reflecting, trying to be honest with myself, thought about my marriage, my vows, my responsibilities. I reminded myself that I had a home, a good man, a life others might envy, but no matter how much I tried, that emptiness didn't go away. It just grew heavier. One evening I found myself standing outside the old bookstore near the train station. Rohan and I had once talked about how we both used to come there as students, hiding between the shelves, escaping into novels. I didn't plan on going in, but I did. Something pulled me. The moment I stepped inside, I saw him, Rohan, sitting on the floor, flipping through a thick, hard cover, with a cup of coffee next to him. He looked up and saw me, and for a few seconds, we just stared at each other. No words, just surprise and something else. Relief, maybe funny place too. "Bump into you," he said with a soft smile. I sat down beside him, I didn't know you'd be here, I didn't. Either, he said. But I'm glad I am. We talked quietly like old friends. Nothing dramatic, nothing forbidden. But being there with him felt natural. Easy, the kind of ease I hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't ask me why I came. He didn't need to. That day something changed for me. I didn't cross a line, physically but emotionally. I left the bookstore, feeling more conflicted than ever. I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew I couldn't live with both silence and secrets at home. Kieran was asleep on the couch, the TV flickering silently in front of him. I stood there watching him, for a moment wondering if he ever felt the same distance I did, if he missed me the way I missed being missed. The next morning, I asked Kieran if we could talk. He looked surprised, but said yes. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we had shared 1,000 meals, but so few meaningful conversations. I feel like we've drifted apart, I said slowly. And I don't know when it started, but I know it's there. He looked down at his hands. I know, he said. I felt it too. His honesty caught me off guard. For the first time in years, I saw something raw in his eyes. Not indifference, but regret and maybe even fear. We don't talk like we used to. I said I miss that. I've been so focused on work, on routine, he said quietly. I thought that's what being a good husband meant, providing, being reliable. I don't need more reliability. I said I need more of you. We sat in silence after that. Not the usual empty kind. This silence felt full of things said and unsaid. I didn't mention Rohan, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because that conversation wasn't about him. It was about me and Kieran, and whether we could find our way back to each other. That week, Kieran started trying more. He came home early one night with takeout from my favorite place, a spot we hadn't visited in years. Another night asked if I wanted to go for a walk, small things, but they mattered. I appreciated the effort. It reminded me that love doesn't vanish overnight. It fades slowly when it's left in the corner, unattended, but maybe it can return if you water it again. Still, I kept thinking about Rohan. We weren't talking much, but I knew he was still there, somewhere in the background of my mind. I missed him, and that scared me. One evening I got a message from him, just online. I hope you're okay. I stared at it for a while before replying, I'm trying. He didn't respond after that, and maybe that was his way of letting go. The following weekend, Kieran suggested we take a short trip, just the two of us. We drove to a quiet hill station, stayed in a modest cabin, and spent 2 days without distractions. No work, no phones, no responsibilities. We talked more in those 2 days than we had in months, about our early years, our dreams, even our disappointments. We laughed. We sat in silence that felt peaceful, not painful. One night, sitting beside the fireplace, Kieran looked at me and said, I don't want to lose you. You haven't, I said. And in that moment, I meant it. When we got back home, life felt slightly different. The routine was still there, but something had softened. We were trying again, slowly, carefully. But the truth is, some parts of me still belong to the version of myself that existed when I was with Rohan. Not in a romantic way, but in the way that he had helped me remember who I used to be. And maybe that's what hurt the most, realizing that I had lost touch with myself long before I lost touch with my husband. I didn't meet Rohan again, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew it wouldn't help. I needed to rebuild what I had if I could, and I couldn't do that while holding on to something or someone else. I still think of him, sometimes not with longing but with gratitude. He reminded me of parts of myself I had forgotten, He woke me up from a long emotional sleep, and now it was up to me to stay awake. It's strange how some people enter your life only for a short time, and yet their impact lasts much longer than their presence. Rohan was one of those people, for me. We never shared anything beyond words, and yet it felt more intimate than most things I'd experienced in years. Boot. He wasn't meant to stay in my life. Maybe. He was just meant to show me something I'd forgotten, who I used to be, what is still needed, and what I could still feel. A few months passed. My marriage wasn't magically fixed, but it was changing slowly with effort from both sides. Kieran and I started spending our weekends together again. We cooked meals, together sat through old movies, and even argued sometimes, but the good kind of arguments, the kind that leads somewhere. I began to see him, not just as the man I'd married, but as the man he was now, a little more tired, maybe a little more worn out by life, but still willing. There were moments when I felt guilty, not because I had done something terrible, but because I had emotionally drifted so far that someone else had become my safe space. I hadn't cheated, not in the way most would define it, but I had confided in someone else, more than I had in my husband, and I had to carry that truth with me silently one afternoon. As I was sorting through the storage cabinet, I found an old photo album. It had pictures from the early years of our marriage, vacations, festivals, even the day we moved into our apartment. We looked so young, so carefree. I smiled at one photo, where Kieran had drawn a silly mustache on himself with a marker. I remembered that day we had been broke, but ridiculously happy. Something about those memories made me tear up, not because I missed those times, but because I realized how far we had come, and how much we had stopped noticing each other. That evening I showed the album to Kieran. He laughed at the mustache photo and said, "I still think I rocked that look." "You looked ridiculous," I said, laughing. Then I grew quiet. "We were different then," I said. "Not better, just more present." He looked at me a little, said, "I know I've been thinking about that a lot lately." We didn't say much after that, but something unspoken passed between us, a quiet understanding that we both had more work to do, not just on our marriage, but on ourselves. I began therapy just for me, not because I was falling apart, because I wanted to understand myself better. I needed to unpack the things I had been pushing away, feelings, needs, regrets. In therapy, I admitted things I hadn't said out loud before, that I had felt invisible, that I had stopped recognizing myself, that I had almost formed an emotional connection outside my marriage, and it scared me how easy it had been. But therapy also helped me forgive myself. I wasn't a terrible person. I was a lonely one, and I tried to cope the only way I knew how, by looking for someone who saw me when I couldn't see myself. Kieran started therapy a few weeks after I did, not because I asked him to, but because he saw the difference it made in me. He said, "Maybe I have things I haven't faced either." That's when I knew we were on the right path. Not perfect, but honest. One day I saw Rohan's name pop up in a group message. One of our mutual friends was getting married. I hadn't spoken to him in months, and even seeing his name made me heart feel strange. Not in a romantic way, but in a way that reminded me of how much had changed. He didn't message me directly, and I didn't reach out either. At the wedding I saw him from across the room. He looked different, maybe a little thinner, maybe more serious. He caught my ear and nodded politely. I smiled back. That was all. Later that night, as I was stepping outside for some air, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Rohan. "Hey," he said softly. "Hi," I replied. I didn't want to leave without saying something. He said, "I'm glad you came." I said we stood there for a few seconds, the music from the hall playing faintly behind. I think about our conversation. Sometimes he said, "They helped me more than you know." "Me too," I said. He smiled. "I hope things are good with you." "They're getting there," I said, "one step at a time." He looked relieved. "You deserve peace, Ria, so do you." And just like that, the moment passed. He walked back in, and I stood there for a few more seconds, letting go of something I didn't realize I was still holding on to. That was the last time I saw him today. As I write this, I feel more grounded. I'm not claiming to have it all figured out. My marriage isn't perfect. I still have days where I feel lost or disconnected, but now I talk about it. I ask for what I need, and I listen when Kieran speaks, even if he doesn't always say things the way I want to hear them. I've also found a version of myself that I thought I had lost, a woman who still has dreams, still needs kindness, still wants to be seen. I'm learning how to love myself again. And through that, I'm learning how to love Kieran differently, not just for who he was, but for who he's trying to become. This story isn't one of betrayal or scandal. It's a story about emotional distance, about rediscovering connection, and about the complicated ways we grow. It's about a woman who almost got lost in her silence and the quiet strength it took to come back to herself. And if there's one thing I've learned through it all, it's this. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's just about showing up again and again, even after you've fallen apart. And I'm still here, still trying, still showing up every single day.